It's a quiet Saturday morning, just before dawn, and the streets are bathed in the soft, blue-gray light of an early sunrise. The faint hum of a city awakening drifts through the air, mingling with the occasional clatter of passing cars. At this hour, the streets are mostly empty, save for a few early risers and night workers like Desmond, a seasoned taxi driver who knows every alley, turn, and shortcut in the city like the back of his hand. He's been driving these streets for years, working long hours to make a decent living in a world that rarely stops to acknowledge the people working behind the scenes. Desmond pulls up in front of a modest yet charming cafe. It's one of those places that looks cozy from the outside, with small, carefully arranged tables on the patio and fairy lights draped across the awning. The kind of spot that caters to a more upscale crowd, but Desmond's not here for anyone's approval. He's tired from a long shift, and he's craving a hot coffee and a quick bite before he heads home. He doesn't often treat himself, but today, the thought of a freshly brewed coffee is too tempting to pass up. As he steps out of his taxi, he notices a couple seated on the patio. They glance in his direction, giving him that familiar look he's experienced countless times. A quick, almost involuntary scan of his clothes, his worn jacket, and the taxi parked beside him. Their expressions shift subtly, from mild curiosity to something colder, less inviting. Desmond ignores it, used to brushing off stares and whispers. He pushes open the door to the cafe and steps inside. Inside, the cafe is warm and inviting, with the smell of freshly ground coffee filling the air. It's a sharp contrast to the chill outside, and for a moment, Desmond feels a sense of peace wash over him. He's not here for long, just enough to order his coffee and head out, but something about the space feels comfortable, almost like it could be a place he'd come to regularly. He approaches the counter, offering the barista a polite smile. The barista, a young woman with a friendly face, looks up but hesitates, her expression faltering when she sees him. Desmond can sense a shift in her demeanor, a subtle but undeniable change from the welcoming look she offered the last customer. She stares at him, as if sizing him up, then glances toward the back, where a man in his late 40s is watching with folded arms. He has the distinct air of someone in charge, exuding a sense of authority that's hard to ignore. The man steps forward, his gaze cold and scrutinizing. "Can I help you?" he asks, the words laced with a hint of annoyance. Desmond nods, keeping his tone friendly and polite. "Just a coffee, please. Black, no sugar." The man's eyes flicker with something, a hesitation, perhaps, or a judgment he doesn't bother to hide. "Actually, we're not open to everyone," he says slowly, his voice low but firm. Desmond blinks, caught off guard. He's not sure he heard correctly. "Excuse me," he replies, his voice calm but questioning. The manager doesn't flinch. "We reserve the right to serve our regular patrons only. It's not personal, just a policy." Desmond feels the familiar sting of being dismissed, reduced to an outsider in a place that, on the surface, is designed to make people feel at home. He takes a moment, standing there in silence, his gaze steady as he tries to gauge the man's intentions. But the manager's expression is resolute, unwavering. He's made up his mind, and Desmond knows better than to push back in a setting like this, where the power dynamics are painfully clear. There's a brief pause before Desmond steps back, nodding slightly, a quiet resignation settling in his eyes. He's been here before, not in this cafe, but in this same situation, in 100 different places and faces that all carry the same message. You don't belong. He turns and walks out, the weight of the moment pressing down on him, heavier than any night shift he's ever worked. Outside, Desmond leans against his taxi, taking a deep breath as he collects himself. The morning air is brisk, and he can feel a storm brewing inside him, a mix of anger, frustration, and an overwhelming sense of weariness. He glances back at the cafe, the warmth of its interior now tainted by the memory of rejection. As Desmond stands outside, he catches sight of his reflection in the cafe's window. It's a glimpse of himself that he rarely stops to consider. The slight hunch in his shoulders from years of hard work, the lines etched into his face from countless early mornings and late nights, the resolute look in his eyes. He's always tried to rise above moments like these, to remind himself that his worth isn't determined by the judgments of strangers, yet somehow, each encounter leaves a subtle scar. His attention shifts as he hears faint laughter from inside. The manager and barista are chatting with the couple who had been sitting on the patio. Desmond notices how they all share a camaraderie, the easy comfort of people who feel at home in a place that, for him, has become unwelcoming. It's a scene he's familiar with, people exchanging pleasantries, treating each other as equals, oblivious to the experience he's just had. He wonders if they even noticed the brief encounter, or if he was just a passing inconvenience, an unwelcome reminder of something they'd rather not see. In that moment, his phone buzzes, pulling him from his thoughts. He glances down to see a message from his niece, a young girl full of energy and curiosity who idolizes him as her Uncle Des. The simple message, a drawing she's made of him with a superhero cape and a big grin, brings a faint smile to his face. He clutches his phone, her innocence a reminder of the brighter parts of his life, the people who see him for who he is, not just what he looks like. But as he looks up at the cafe once more, he feels a sense of quiet resolve building inside him. He may have been turned away, but he won't let this small moment define him. He knows who he is, the work he's put in, and the legacy he's slowly building, even if these people see him as nothing more than a face behind a wheel. Desmond Williams isn't just a taxi driver. He's a devoted father, a community mentor, and someone who's worked hard every day of his life to give his family a future. Coming from a modest upbringing, Desmond has faced struggles and prejudice since his youth, but he's always been determined to rise above it. He remembers growing up watching his mother work 2 jobs to keep food on the table, her hands calloused, yet her spirit unbroken. She always told him, "Dignity, Desmond, that's what no one can take from you." Those words have stayed with him, guiding him even when life throws him hurdles. Over the years, Desmond made a quiet name for himself in his community. His taxi has become a fixture, and he's the type of driver who knows his regulars by name, always ready with a joke, a listening ear, or a bit of advice. To him, his job isn't just about driving. It's about the connections he makes and the lives he touches, however small the moment. Despite his modest income, he's managed to save bit by bit, and a few years back, he started putting his money into small investments. His goal has been to provide a legacy, something stable for his son to inherit someday. He's always thought of his hard work as a way to keep doors open for his son that were closed to him. Unbeknownst to many, Desmond has managed to acquire ownership stakes in a few buildings around the city. It's his way of breaking barriers and quietly claiming his space in a world that often tries to push him to the margins. One of those buildings, ironically, is the very cafe where he was denied service. Desmond's lawyer had handled the transactions, and he had never actually set foot in the place. To him, it was simply another investment, a piece of security for his future. But now, as he looks back at the cafe, he feels a strange twist of irony settle over him. The idea that he could own something in a place where he's not even seen as worthy enough to buy a cup of coffee hits him hard. It brings to light a deep, underlying tension he's tried to push aside his entire life. The feeling that, no matter how much he accomplishes, he's constantly reduced to a single aspect of his identity. Despite his accomplishments, Desmond keeps a low profile, often downplaying his achievements even with those closest to him. His pride comes not from external validation, but from knowing he's done right by his family and his community. His true fulfillment is seeing his son's eyes light up when he talks about the future, the one Desmond is working so hard to build for him. At this moment, however, as he reflects on his life, Desmond realizes he's tired. Tired of staying quiet, of shrinking back to avoid making waves, of constantly swallowing his pride just to make other people comfortable. For the first time, he feels a desire to reclaim the dignity his mother taught him about, to make it clear that he deserves respect, not because of what he owns, but because of who he is. This internal conflict ignites a fire in him. As he stands outside the cafe, memories of past slights and struggles surface, merging with the insult of today. He's always chosen the high road, but now he wonders if it's time to take a stand, not just for himself but for every person who's ever felt invisible. Desmond stands on the sidewalk, his gaze fixed on the cafe, feeling the weight of years of quiet endurance beginning to crack. He takes a breath, determined not to let this be yet another moment he lets slip by without standing up for himself. Gathering his thoughts, he steps back into the cafe, this time with purpose. His presence is undeniable now, as the employees and patrons shift their gazes, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Desmond approaches the counter, and the young barista who had previously denied him service looks uneasy. The barista's casual indifference has turned to visible discomfort, as if he realizes, for the first time, that he might have misjudged the situation. Desmond calmly asks to see the manager, his tone firm yet controlled. The manager arrives, slightly frazzled by Desmond's composed but unyielding demeanor. He begins to offer hollow explanations, citing company policies and misunderstandings, but Desmond cuts him off. His voice remains steady, yet there's a quiet intensity to his words. Misunderstanding? I simply asked for a cup of coffee, Desmond says. Tell me, what policy was I breaking by walking into this cafe, just like anyone else? The manager stammers, unprepared for the pointed question. A few patrons glance over, their attention caught by Desmond's quiet strength. There's an uncomfortable silence, and the atmosphere grows tense as it becomes clear that this isn't a scene anyone expected. Desmond senses their discomfort, but he's done stepping aside to make others feel at ease. Just then, Desmond makes a decision that will change everything. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out his phone, and dials his lawyer. Without taking his eyes off the manager, he asks the lawyer to clarify who owns the building housing the cafe. The realization dawns on the manager's face as Desmond calmly explains his connection to the property. The murmur among the patrons grows louder, and the barista looks on, wide-eyed. The truth begins to ripple through the crowd. The man they had dismissed as just another taxi driver is, in fact, their landlord. The power dynamic shifts palpably, and Desmond takes in the moment. This isn't about vengeance. It's about dignity. He turns to the manager and barista, meeting their eyes directly, his voice steady yet carrying the weight of years of endurance. All I wanted was to be treated with respect, he says quietly, his gaze unwavering. But perhaps, respect only comes when you think someone is worthy of it. And maybe, just maybe, that's where you went wrong today. The crowd, now fully invested, watches as Desmond reclaims his dignity, no longer allowing himself to be sidelined. The cafe employees are left speechless, caught in the realization of their own biases and the impact of their actions. Desmond leaves the cafe, not with anger but with a profound sense of peace, finally having spoken the truth that he's held inside for far too long. As Desmond steps out of the cafe, his head held high, the crowd inside remains in stunned silence. A few moments pass before a quiet murmur ripples through the patrons, each person processing what just unfolded. News spreads quickly. By the end of the day, several locals and cafe regulars know that the taxi driver who was turned away unjustly is actually the building owner. That evening, Desmond's lawyer calls, confirming that he has options. If he chooses, he could demand changes, or even replace the cafe tenants altogether. Desmond listens, weighing his choices. Deep down, though, he knows that his decision isn't about retribution. It's about sending a message, one that goes beyond a simple change in management. The next morning, Desmond returns to the cafe, not out of anger but to set things right on his terms. He meets with the cafe's owner, who has heard about the incident and is visibly nervous, apologizing profusely for the actions of his staff. Desmond listens calmly, but this time, he speaks up, clear and firm. I'm not here to shut you down, he begins, his tone unwavering. I'm here because I want to create a space where everyone, no matter who they are, feels welcome. I think we can agree that change starts here. The cafe owner, sensing both the gravity of Desmond's words and his grace, agrees. Together, they discuss ways to ensure the space reflects respect and inclusivity for all customers. Desmond's influence isn't just in his ownership of the building. It's in his ability to inspire change, to make his community think more deeply about assumptions and biases. Word of the incident and Desmond's response begins to spread around town, inspiring conversations among residents. People who once saw him only as a driver now recognize the strength and resilience of a man who stands for his principles, who acts with both dignity and wisdom. Desmond's quiet actions have created a lasting impact, challenging everyone who witnessed it to look within themselves and reconsider the value they place on every person who crosses their path. As Desmond leaves the cafe that day, he notices people lingering outside, their faces a mixture of curiosity, respect, and even embarrassment. News of the incident spreads quickly through the neighborhood, reaching those who knew Desmond only as a quiet, hard-working taxi driver. Suddenly, the community sees him in a new light, not just as a successful property owner, but as someone who had experienced unfair treatment and handled it with resilience and dignity. In the following days, the cafe's owner finds himself facing backlash. Longtime patrons question his judgment and reflect on their own behavior. Some loyal customers hesitate to return, troubled by the prejudice that had surfaced so publicly. The owner, now grappling with the impact of his actions on his business and reputation, reaches out to Desmond for a meeting, hoping to make amends. Desmond agrees, understanding that this is a chance to turn a painful encounter into a positive change for everyone involved. When they meet, the cafe owner expresses his regret, offering a sincere apology. He explains that he's been facing his own struggles trying to keep up with larger chains moving into the area, which has caused him stress and affected his decisions. Desmond listens thoughtfully, recognizing the shared pressure they face as small business owners in a competitive world. He tells the owner that while it's understandable to feel overwhelmed, it's essential to treat each person who walks through the doors with respect, a principle he's always upheld in his own business ventures. Moved by Desmond's words, the owner takes the conversation to heart. He promises Desmond that he will implement changes in his cafe to foster a more welcoming and inclusive environment. As a gesture of goodwill, he asks Desmond if he would be interested in partnering to create a community hub, bringing local residents together through events and open discussions about race, unity, and progress. Desmond is touched by the offer and agrees, seeing it as a meaningful way to encourage understanding and positive change. The cafe soon becomes more than a place for coffee and food. It transforms into a space where people feel safe sharing their stories and experiences. Desmond and the cafe owner organize weekly Unity Nights, where they invite people from all walks of life to come together for open conversations. Attendance grows as people find comfort and solidarity in the group, and even individuals who were hesitant at first find themselves coming back each week. Over time, the cafe builds a reputation not only for its welcoming atmosphere, but also for the unique sense of community it inspires. Through these changes, Desmond notices a shift in the way the neighborhood views him, not only as a successful entrepreneur, but as a symbol of resilience, compassion, and integrity. Strangers greet him with respect, and old acquaintances express their admiration for how he handled the situation. Many see his journey as an inspiration, realizing that sometimes the quietest people have the most impactful stories to tell. The once divisive moment at the cafe becomes a catalyst for transformation within the community. Desmond finds fulfillment in knowing that his actions, combined with the owner's openness to change, have left a lasting positive impact. The cafe, once a place where he felt like an outsider, now stands as a testament to the power of understanding and reconciliation. Months pass, and the cafe flourishes as the heartbeat of the neighborhood, thanks to the Unity Nights and the efforts of Desmond and the owner to foster a welcoming space. As word spreads about the cafe's transformation, it attracts people from different parts of town, drawn by its reputation as a symbol of inclusion and community. The once small gatherings evolve into lively events where people openly share their stories, ask questions, and reflect on their experiences. Through this initiative, the community finds a safe place to confront issues of race, prejudice, and bias, topics that are often difficult but necessary to address. Desmond's involvement in the cafe's transformation is particularly meaningful to the regular patrons, who come to respect and admire his strength, wisdom, and humility. His story of facing prejudice and responding with grace becomes a source of inspiration, particularly for the young people in the neighborhood who view him as a role model. They see him not just as a successful businessman, but as someone who exemplifies resilience and patience, showing them a way to navigate challenges with dignity. One day, a local journalist hears about Desmond's story and the cafe's revival, and she reaches out to him for an interview. She is deeply moved by the journey of the quiet taxi driver who not only stood up to prejudice, but also turned an uncomfortable experience into a positive force for his community. Desmond hesitates at first, not one to seek the spotlight, but he realizes the potential impact his story could have if shared on a larger scale. He agrees, hoping that his story might encourage others to look beyond appearances and take the time to understand people for who they truly are. The article is published and gains significant attention, sparking conversations beyond the local community. Desmond receives messages of support and appreciation from people all over the city, some of whom share their own experiences of discrimination and thank him for showing them a path forward. His story resonates deeply, touching people from different backgrounds who recognize the importance of standing up against prejudice with patience and grace. Through this newfound attention, Desmond is offered speaking engagements and even a small segment on a local television show, where he shares his journey and the transformation that took place at the cafe. With each opportunity, he speaks humbly and sincerely, always circling back to the lesson he's learned, that compassion and understanding have the power to bridge divides and that even the smallest actions can create a ripple effect of change. As the months roll into years, Desmond's influence within the community grows. He continues his work as a taxi driver, but he's no longer seen as just a quiet, anonymous figure in the background. People wave and greet him warmly, and he often finds himself in heartfelt conversations with passengers, sharing stories, laughter, and the occasional piece of advice. The cafe, once a place that denied him service, has now become a cornerstone of the community, where people of all backgrounds gather and feel welcome. Desmond and the owner have created a legacy together, a place where differences are acknowledged and celebrated, and where difficult conversations can lead to growth and mutual respect. The small cafe serves as a testament to the power of understanding, resilience, and the courage it takes to transform a painful experience into something meaningful. Desmond reflects on how his life has changed. He realizes that, in a way, he has become a bridge in his community, a quiet symbol of hope and unity. The cafe owner, too, has transformed, using his platform to advocate for inclusivity and equality. Together, they've shown that change begins with a willingness to look inward, to question biases, and to choose empathy over judgment. In the end, Desmond understands that while the world may not change overnight, small actions, when multiplied, can lead to lasting impact. He holds a deep sense of pride, not only in his role as the building owner, but as a person who helped inspire change in his community. And each time he passes the cafe on his daily routes, he feels a quiet satisfaction in knowing that what once was a place of exclusion has become a beacon of acceptance, a place he helped to build, brick by brick, with kindness and resilience.